Hey everyone, welcome to our Supporting Sensitive Children preview class. My name is Petro. I am the founder of Teach Through Love, and I want to thank you for joining me here today. It means a lot that you have taken the time out of your day to be here because I know you have a lot of choices and there are no shortage of parenting workshops online for you to consider. So I am very grateful that you guys have chosen to connect with me and my community here at Teach Through Love, and I hope that we can provide you a lot of support as we go through this session. So I want you guys to imagine that you spend your days eating, working, functioning while standing in a bounce house full of children. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? The giant inflatable playhouses that so awesomely wear out our kids, after birthday parties and carnivals and things. So imagine that you're trying to live and work and accomplish your day-to-day tasks while standing in one of these bounce houses, surrounded by exuberant children jumping, yelling, screaming, playing. So can you just imagine for a second the amount of strength that it would take for you to remain still in this environment, let alone to be focused and calm, just trying to remain still and keep your balance while you do things, but then focused and calm. Think about how difficult that would be. With all the jumping and the screaming and the flailing arms coming at you, you never know when you're going to get a kick right in the face. So this is what life can be like for our sensitive kids. And if you are a sensitive adult, you probably know what I'm talking about. It can be really loud and jarring and destabilizing. And the act of just trying to stay steady can be so exhausting that sometimes kids can't keep it together, right? They might run and demand that everybody stop jumping, or they push everyone down in an attempt to let them know that they're overwhelmed or that they want their attention, that they even want to jump too. So they're pushing everyone down or they're yelling themselves. And this is an attempt to stop the feelings of fear or instability that might come over them. And they might join in too. They might lose themselves in the chaos. They might become unrestrained or emotionally chaotic themselves. And then there's another group of children who might sort of just hide away in the corner of the bounce house, trying to stay very still and very quiet until it all passes, until everybody stops jumping, until there's nobody left. So before we talk about anything today, I know that it can be really overwhelming when we have sensitive children because there may be so many different areas that they are sensitive in. So we have to start small. So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to think about what is the most difficult challenge that I currently have with my child. Because you may have lots of different challenges. And if you try to fix them all at once, if you try to go in and fix stuff, I don't even want you to go in and to fix, but if you try to, you may find that you get overwhelmed yourself and that you can't do that. So it's very important for you, for just this class, think about one challenge that is the most difficult for you. It might be your child not participating and you having to sort of drag them everywhere because they're so sensitive that they don't want to join in. Or it may be that you're having a child who gets triggered into a rage or a meltdown very quickly. And it may be somewhere on, along that spectrum. I want you to think about what is the most difficult challenge that I have with my child. So these behaviors that we see in our sensitive kids, we may have a lot of different names for them. We may see children who are hyperactive or who are inattentive, unmotivated, resistant, or aggressive, unfocused, defiant. These are all ways that the sensitivity can manifest. But I want us to know and go in with the belief that these behaviors always have a root cause. When we're speaking of children who are constantly trying to manage an onslaught of information, which can quickly overwhelm them, we have to remember that the root cause is a child who is beyond their maximum capacity to cope in that moment. That doesn't mean that they will always stay in that place of sensitivity. We may always carry sensitivities into adulthood, but it doesn't mean that we always stay stuck in not being able to move to a next step or to move out of a place of fear or anger or tension. But when we feel everything, sometimes it's very scary for us. When we feel everything so intensely, the environment quickly becomes too much to handle. It's too destabilizing, too stressful. And so the sensitive child may shut down and withdraw, or they may act out. But those wild behaviors that you see in a child who acts out, those are a manifestation of this internal feeling of chaos, of boredom, of confusion, literally feeling things on our skin too much. So the problem becomes in trying to understand our children is that we try to teach them how to adapt, but we often feel stuck. We feel like they're running the show. We try to understand them and we want them to adapt, but we often approach them with discipline that actually adds more stress to the equation, or we allow our stress to dictate the situation because we're tired of being backed up into a corner or up against a wall. And this, what does this do, you guys? This perpetuates a cycle of negativity. And if we allow that negativity to continue, we get stuck. It just becomes a perpetual cycle of trying to fix situations, or we add guilt or logic. We say, I don't pressure my child, but I try to reason with them. But we can't reach a child who is stressed out beyond their maximum capacity to cope. We can't reach them with logic. So if we let this cycle continue, we then have a child who gets emotionally, physically, mentally worn out. They wither away and they start to slowly detach from their parents, their interests, the world, and really any sense that they have much to offer at all. What do we become? We become frustrated. We get stressed out. We're resentful, angry, confused. So I know what this experience is like as a child and as a parent, how stressful it can be. I know that we don't want to have an experience of parenting that is filled with disappointment or fear, but when we feel like we do here, when we feel frustrated and angry and stressed out, confused or resentful, we end up feeling like parenting is a disappointment, like we're never going to be able to connect with our children, and we suffer a lot of fear around that and loss for this experience that we thought was going to be different. So if you are a parent who feels like it's really hard to connect with your sensitive child in ways that will help, I'm going to share a few things with you today that may not feel like you're doing anything, but I want you to know from a sensitive kid perspective and as a parent of a sensitive kid, it absolutely makes a difference. And that we want to move you out of this place of frustration and anger and stressed out and confusion and feeling resentful. But it's going to take a little bit of change on everybody's part. So have any of you guys experienced this? Have you experienced this feeling like you missed out on a piece of parenting that you thought, on an experience of parenting that you thought you were going to have? Or do you feel frustrated, resentful, like you're not enjoying this experience? Share in the chat. Let me know how you feel, what it's like for you parenting a sensitive child. Sylvia says, I'm heartbroken. Yes, I feel all of those things. Yes, I do. Yes, and like I'm a failure as a parent. Oh, that's the worst, when you feel like you're not reaching your kids. That is the most terrifying feeling, because that, again, that sense of loss, like we're losing them, is right there. Amy feels like a failure, and Sylvia's saying like absolutely, unfortunately. Frustration, failure, all of that. And that, oh, this is a big one. Like helping him get his sadness and anger out is so draining. I feel so hopeless. Glad to hear I'm not the only one. No, you are not the only one. Sky feels like she's never parenting well enough for her daughter. Or can we be present enough? I'm not sure how to provide what my child needs. So these are big, big feelings that we need to honor with each other. And I'm here to say that I completely feel for you. I only have one child, so I can't imagine what it's like having, a house full of sensitive kids. So it takes a lot. And I know this also because my own parents were mystified by my behavior. They were deeply troubled. My mother, and we don't have a relationship at this time, and we have had a very tenuous relationship all of my life, but I know that she deeply wanted to connect with me. She very much wanted that. So this is me on the screen, you guys. This is my little, somewhere around like 2, I guess I was 2-year-old self on the left. And then on the picture I'm there on the right with my dad. I was probably around 7 or 8. I remember that itchy, scratchy, green, velvety dress of hell. Yes, that's what it felt like on my skin. This was like Thanksgiving, I think. And You can see in my face, I've got my arms crossed over me. I'm in my dad's arms. I've crossed my arms over me, and my face looks a little like, how long is that camera gonna stay there? And that's kind of how I felt as a child. I felt like, shut down, don't look at me, don't talk to me, this is too much. But I really wanted to talk and play and show you things, but it was very difficult. And I know it was really difficult for my parents to understand what was going on, why they couldn't connect with me, why my mother would say I showed no emotion, but yet I was so full of emotion and so reactive. I was constantly trying to find my bearings, mentally, physically, emotionally. I was trying to filter out all the messages I was constantly receiving. Tactile sensations that made the clothing unbearable and restrictive. The auditory noises that made it impossible to concentrate or sometimes even process the language I was hearing. Sometimes language would come at me and I would hear the words, but it would take me a very long time to actually make sense of those words. The overwhelming sights, the sounds, the scents that made going out really anxiety producing and headache inducing. And also the empathic messages I was intuiting from the emotions of everyone around me. I was socially awkward in action, but I was highly perceptive and very empathetic, even though I could not express that clearly. I seemed cold, withdrawn, unempathetic, but I was full of it so much, so full of so much feeling, and not all of it mine, that I didn't know how to filter it out. I didn't know how to process it all. And now I am raising a daughter who, as a baby, had two settings. Now she's on 10, but this is how I want to just picture her because, oh, look at that face, right? She still eats like that and looks like that after she eats sometimes, a mess everywhere. And very focused and determined that has been her since the day she was born. She had two speeds as a setting. She was either smiling and happy as can be, or absolutely was in a fever pitch, ear-piercing scream. She never actually just cried or whimpered, she was either in full throttle panic mode or pleasantly and happily engaged with whatever she was doing. She was demanding, like I said, very persistent, demanding from the beginning. I know what I want kind of way, in a good way. Some of her first words were, I do it, and I'm not going to stop screaming until I do it myself. Until you untie me from this car seat, let me climb back in myself and buckle myself in. That was the kind of kid that she was. She was a sensory seeking child. She gave you hugs that you could not let go of, and she still to this day sort of doesn't always come at you gently. So she was sensory seeking in that she really learns by touching everything and being involved in her world. And she would wake up running and never stop moving until she just ran to her bed at the end of the day. She cries very easily, and not just when she's sad, but just when she's overwhelmed, angry, embarrassed, afraid, disappointed, even joy, just like me, cries at the drop of a hat. That's why I said I would have gone to law school, but I would cry if I was giving the closing arguments and things. I would probably start crying because I'm so emotionally sensitive, but also very logical and very rule bound. And, I like things like that. I like when things are in their place. So does my daughter, and she will notice if you move something out of place. Sounds too, she never liked the sound of the vacuum, covers her ears for loud trucks. Singing happy birthday was a big no-no when she was around 3. So you probably recognize some of these traits in your own children or in yourself, because usually this is hereditary. This is genetics, a lot of it. So yes, to some degree, all children are reactive and sensitive, especially in early childhood. This is the time when kids are most reactive. But sensitivity is this trait that we can identify by the duration, the intensity, and the frequency of the reactivity, and the degree to which it actually impacts your life or your child's daily life. So when children are young and sensitive, it can really feel like a never-ending cycle of meltdowns, peppered with less and less confident displays of your empathy and perhaps reduced compassion, because after a bit of time, it starts to get really difficult. So you have a sensitive kid, and it can be really draining on you. And then we can start to unconsciously focus on all of those downsides of the sensitivity. We see it as a burden. We can't go anywhere. They won't eat anything. They cry so much. They're so clingy. They bump into everybody. They don't ever stop and think. And we can really feel the weight, the enormity of that task that lies ahead of us as parents. And that can keep us from realizing that with great, great care, their perceptions, their persistence, this deep feeling, all of this strong desire for fairness, this actually makes them more conscientious and aware of their environment, of the moods of other people, of the emotions, sensitive to the emotions of other people. And that they actually have the potential to become some of the most creative, intuitive, empathetic people that you will ever know. And I know that it can feel like a roller coaster every day. But we want to hold this session with the underlying premise that all of these challenges are going to make for a really great life, a really great experience for our kids. And with the underlying premise that yes, the world is experienced more intensely by some of our children, but that the environment and our relationship with them has such a great effect on their ability to adapt and their potential to not just cope, but actually thrive. So a lot of you were saying in the chat, you have tears streaming down your face. This is my twin boys. This is my daughter. So you're recognizing these qualities in your children. How do your children show their sensitivity? What is it that they struggle with? A lot of you were just saying, me too, same here. It sounds like we're going through a lot of the same challenges. So I just love this quote, storms make oaks take deeper root. We really do get a deeper experience and connection because of this sensitivity. So you guys are writing in tactile sensitivity. We have a family with 2 of the 3 kids are very sensitive and each in different ways. So that can be very confusing and difficult for you if you're not taking care of yourself. One mom says, I wholeheartedly believe that these attributes are strengths. So yes, that is, if you can go with that, then it makes each day, each roller coaster, each up and down a little bit easier. What does it mean really to be sensitive? What do we know about sensitivity? Elaine Aron is the author of the Highly Sensitive series of books, Highly Sensitive Person, The Highly Sensitive Child, and she says 15 to 20% of children are born with nervous systems that are highly aware and quick to react to everything. So we've got 1 in 5 children that experiences the world more intensely, and these kids are more vulnerable to the effects of stress. So when we have a demand for change on our system, we react to take care of ourselves in that situation, depending on the situation. Little things, it could be little stressors that interrupt you when you're focused. But that noise to one person may be a simple interruption that they immediately can get back and focus on task. It may sound completely different to a sensitive child. To just give you an example, go back to our bounce house, thinking about what it's like trying to stand still. So when sensitive kids get destabilized, it's more intense for them, and they can get destabilized more easily, more often. So this is a nervous system that's highly aware. They're taking in way more than everybody else. So they're quick to react to things. And again, being highly sensitive, this can be in different areas, mentally, physically, emotionally. Things can be overwhelming for children. They're naturally more reactive to stimuli, but they could have learning challenges that make mentally things, their processing may be slower. We can have physical challenges that maybe our balance, our coordination is a little bit different. Sensitivity is not something that it's just, they're doing it on purpose. They need to just toughen up. This is biological. This has effects on our nervous system. So 1 in 5 children. Now we have various labels to describe different clusters of behaviors. We may have children on the autism spectrum with sensory processing disorder. You may have a child who's been labeled oppositionally defiant. These are all labels that sort of talk about behaviors as we can cluster them together and group them together. ADD, but we're not going to talk about the particulars of those individual labels. We're going to talk about the spectrum of sensitivity. There are a myriad of combinations of experiences and genes that produce a sensitive child, but we're not here to just speak to those individual labels like, SPD or ASD, but to really come to the understanding that whatever your child's particular combination of sensory sensitivities, whether they're sensory seeking and high intensity, or whether they seem avoidant of stressful situations or more passive and undermotivated. Know that these sensitivities are very real, that they have a biological basis, and that they are not willful displays of immaturity or a kid wanting what they want or just a refusal to change, which is what my parents really thought, because they didn't have this understanding. Nobody was talking about, these kinds of things in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up. But they are very real, these sensitivities, and we're learning more and more about them. So it's really very important that we accept that the demand for change on a sensitive child's system can be too great, and that they have a longer learning curve, and that no amount of telling them to just get over it is really going to impact that development in a positive direction. That's not how it's going to work. Sensitive children have different wiring, and the connections that they have in their brains, they may be slower, they may be less efficient. They're hyper-reactive, and it makes it hard to really stay regulated. So a few years ago, there was an article in Scientific American called On the Trail of the Orchid Child, if any of you have read about this. And this story talked about the concept of the orchid children. This is a concept in child development that speaks to the psychological resilience of children. And it was studied by a couple of human development specialists, Thomas Boyce and Bruce Ellis and their colleagues, and they first published their findings on the orchid children back in 2005. And the orchid children refer to our most sensitive children. And they describe these children as having high reactivity. And their development and their potential to thrive is not only influenced by their environment, but their success really relies on a healthy, nurturing experience, much like the orchid, which requires a very delicate balance of sun and water for it to thrive. And then in contrast to our orchid children, we have the rest of the population, which they've classified as dandelion children. So these are our more hardy kids. They're less reactive, so these children have low reactivity, and they can thrive despite a lack of optimal conditions, even including stressful home environments. They are able to thrive. They have less health problems. They have less depression. So even despite having the same kinds of stress as the orchid children, these children actually can thrive. So our orchid children, in contrast to our dandelion children, they are highly sensitive to their environment, and especially to the quality of care and parenting that they receive. And this is something Boyce and Ellis, these two researchers, they found something that was really, really surprising. Now, they expected that the sensitive children would sort of wither under stressful environments, right? We can expect that if we have a sensitive child and we put it in a stressful environment, it's not going to have the best outcome. That was to be expected. But what they didn't expect was that when orchid children were provided these nurturing environments with a lot of tender, loving care, extra nurturing, extra understanding, longer timelines. So having this understanding that our kids are going to have a developmental curve that is different, and we have this responsive, empathetic parenting and this quality of care, what they found was that the orchid children thrived beyond their dandelion counterparts. They had higher rates of success and better health when they were nurtured in these environments. So yes, we may feel like it's really difficult, but your kids, and I know this is only anecdotal, but they've already studied the science and they're saying this is true. And from my own experience, I have a kid who at home, I explained to you her speeds and how she can be so rigid and take everything personally and think so much. It's difficult. Like you said, it's a roller coaster. But when I get this kid's, she doesn't get a report card per se from her school. They write up these reports. It's a winter report about her. And in there, it talks about how my child has an ability to self-regulate and stay focused and calm in her classroom beyond that of her peers, beyond that of what is expected. Now, I have been parenting like this on my own journey since before she was born. So she's had this from day one. Doesn't mean that I don't get angry and that I don't freak out and that I don't have my own meltdowns as a sensitive mommy. But it means that and that we don't have our issues at home, but when I send her out into the world, she's thriving, she's growing, and she's beyond growing and coping. But I have to tell you that it did take a lot on my part. I changed a lot. I accommodate a lot for my daughter. I don't change the world for her, but I make sure that my home is a place where she has the right conditions, where I don't use my baggage to control her because I'm afraid that she'll never get it or I'm afraid that she'll be disrespectful. I've let a lot of that go. And so it makes our experience, this is not about getting rid of the sensitivity. We can't get rid of it. It's not going anywhere. We've already said it's a gift. But what these children have to offer is so much. If we can provide the right kinds of conditions, they have so much to offer. So the orchid children, they not only have the worst outcomes compared to dandelion children experiencing those same levels of stress, but they also have the best outcomes when given the right kind of nurturing. And this is the most important thing that I could share with you today, as difficult as it is. Please know that when you are providing the right kind of environment for your children, and we'll talk about more what that should look like, that even if you don't see those immediate results, that things are changing, that you are helping your children. So we all have these gifts to give to the world. The difference is that without the extra tender, loving care and the nurturing environment, that our sensitive kids may not fully realize their gifts and their potential, their full potential. Their environment must support their delicate sensitivity. So what we're here today to do is to help you begin to provide your orchids with the right kind of soil, the right amount of sun and water so that they can thrive. And I've pinpointed 3 key areas of focus that we can support our sensitive children. And these are the topics in my upcoming online series. This today is a preview of that series. This is a 3-week workshop where we will explore each of these individual areas in depth and discuss how we can make changes in the 3 different areas. But we just can't cover it all here in this short class. If I could, I would, because I love to give you guys information. But we're going to gather the seeds today so each topic can start to germinate these new beginnings. And I'll share with you one takeaway tip for each area so that you can start to make changes in your home today. So these 3 areas represent these focal points that will spiral together to provide the optimal conditions for our children to thrive. And we start by looking at the state of our relationship. The next place that we move to is assessing the stressors that our children experience. We have to know what it's like for our children, their individual stressors, what triggers them. We really need to know about our kids' individual lives. And it will change as they go through different times of childhood, different stages of development. Things will change. But we take the state of the relationship and we take our understanding of what stresses our child. And then we can start to finally form a roadmap and design this roadmap of success through skill building. So we have the state of the relationship, which for me is the most important part. That's why we put it's at the top. It's number 1. Then we're going to spiral through stress and we're going to start to really get in there and figure out what is it about our kid and about our own stress, because we really have to have the tolerance for our children. We have to be there for our kids to be able to tolerate their stress. We have to feel like we can tolerate our own feelings and that our needs are met. But each of these areas depends on the others to be strong in order for our children to flourish. We can't have a weak state of the relationship and give our kids sensory tools and expect them to learn from us, because the relationship is the foundation. Knowing what tools they need and where their stress is coming from is part 2. And then building that roadmap of, okay, what skills do I need to build for my child? Help them build. That's part 3. But we can't practice skills without being fully engaged and present with our kids. Right? We can't build skills without reducing the stress and providing the tools that help children cope. So each area of focus is going to build upon the other.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me for part 1 of our Supporting Sensitive Children free series class. Make sure to come on over to our Facebook group. Join me for our Facebook Lives where we get to connect and chat together, and then check your email for video number 2 coming at you tomorrow.